On July 8, 2026, along a road in southern Ukraine, a tanker marked as carrying water suddenly caught fire after being hit by a drone. Ukraine said there was no water inside. It was gasoline. Vehicles painted to look like milk tankers are also reportedly being used to carry diesel, while other shipments are increasingly appearing in civilian cars, motorcycles, and ATVs. This points to a significant change taking place behind the front lines. Russia still has to move large amounts of fuel, ammunition, and equipment toward Crimea and its combat units in the south. But the vehicles that were once easy to recognize are gradually disappearing from familiar logistics formations. In their place are smaller, quieter shipments that are much harder to distinguish from normal civilian traffic. The problem for Russia is that Ukraine is also changing the way it hunts for them. When a fuel tanker no longer looks like a military fuel tanker, what still allows it to be detected? How far can Russia disperse and conceal its supply network? And if every fuel shipment requires more time, more vehicles, and more layers of protection to reach Crimea, how will that pressure eventually affect the battlefield in the south? Stay with Military Force as we break it down. Russia is changing how it moves fuel across southern Ukraine and toward Crimea because conventional tankers are becoming easier for Ukrainian drones to identify and track. According to Ukrainian commanders interviewed by Reuters, some vehicles have been marked as water carriers or painted to resemble milk tankers, while allegedly carrying gasoline or diesel instead. Reuters noted that it could not independently verify every claim, so these reports should be treated as battlefield accounts rather than confirmed facts. The tactic reflects a broader problem for Russian logistics. A fuel truck has a clear military value, but it is also visually distinctive. Large cylindrical tanks, repeated routes, and links to known military supply areas can make such vehicles easier to classify from the air. By changing markings and appearance, Russian forces may be trying to reduce the chance that a drone operator can immediately separate a military shipment from ordinary road traffic. Appearance alone, however, does not decide whether a vehicle is important. Ukrainian operators can also study patterns of movement. A truck that repeatedly leaves a known storage area, travels at unusual hours, follows military routes, or appears with armed escorts may attract attention, even if it looks civilian. Over time, route, timing, origin, destination, and behavior can become as important as paint or markings. This creates problems for crews watching crowded roads near the front. That matters because fuel is not simply another supply item. It supports almost every mobile part of a modern force. Tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, self-propelled artillery, trucks, radar systems, generators, and short-range air defense all depend on steady deliveries to remain active. If fuel arrives late, some units may still have ammunition and crews, but lose part of their ability to move, reposition, or support operations. This is why camouflage can have value even when it does not make a vehicle invisible. If Russia can delay identification, force Ukrainian crews to spend more time confirming targets, or create uncertainty around civilian-looking traffic, it may improve the survival rate of some shipments. At the same time, the method raises a difficult identification problem because military logistics and civilian traffic can begin to look increasingly similar. That pressure matters because transport capacity depends on movement, not simply on available fuel stocks. The available evidence therefore points to a contest over recognition as much as destruction. Russia is trying to make fuel movement harder to classify, while Ukraine is trying to identify military purpose through behavior rather than appearance alone. But changing the paint on a tanker solves only part of the problem. If larger movements can still be tracked from above, Russia must also reconsider the size, routes, and organization of its transport network. Russia is increasingly replacing large supply movements with smaller groups of vehicles as Ukrainian drones make concentrated transport easier to detect and attack. Ukrainian intelligence says fuel tankers can travel with pickup trucks fitted with machine guns, while drivers use secondary roads where aerial observation may be less consistent. The same reporting says civilian cars, ATVs and motorcycles are also being used to move fuel, ammunition, food, and other supplies toward Russian positions in southern Ukraine. This approach offers a tactical advantage. A smaller group creates a weaker visual signature and presents fewer valuable targets at one time. If one vehicle is detected and struck, the loss may affect only a limited shipment rather than an entire convoy. Light vehicles can also use narrow roads and farm tracks that would be difficult for long columns. Where drones can watch roads for hours, spreading movement across more vehicles and routes can reduce the danger of one attack causing a major interruption. The cost is efficiency. A tanker can move a large amount of fuel in one trip, while motorcycles, civilian cars, and ATVs carry only a fraction of that load. Replacing one large movement with many small ones therefore requires more trips, drivers, vehicles, and coordination. It also increases maintenance demands because more engines, tires, and transport platforms must remain available. The burden grows when supplies pass through several transfer points. Fuel or ammunition that once moved directly from a depot to a forward distribution area may now be divided, moved in stages, and transferred again before reaching the unit that needs it. Every transfer takes time and creates another location that must be organized and protected. Even when the cargo survives, the process can become slower and more labor-intensive. Fragmentation also makes timing less predictable. A unit might receive food while still waiting for fuel or ammunition before transport is ready. That imbalance can spread across connected formations. Russia is also reported to be dispersing supplies away from large storage sites. Ukrainian sources say fuel and other material have been hidden in camouflaged dugouts, abandoned buildings, agricultural facilities, and some civilian gas stations. The logic is similar to smaller convoys. A large depot offers efficiency because trucks can load and depart from one place, but it also concentrates valuable material in a location that can be watched and attacked. Smaller storage points reduce the consequences if one site is discovered. Yet this method creates a management problem. Commanders must know how much fuel, ammunition, and food is stored across many locations, which sites remain safe, and which routes can still be used. Deliveries must be synchronized so forward units receive the right supplies at the right time. Security also becomes harder because more locations require guards, concealment, communications, and transport support. The more storage points Russia creates, the more coordination the system needs to remain reliable. Russian logistics is therefore moving from a system designed mainly for efficiency toward one designed increasingly for survival. That adaptation may protect shipments, but it raises the number of moving parts required to keep the network functioning. The cost is extra time, manpower, fuel, maintenance, and planning needed to deliver the same amount of material. This matters because military logistics depends on flow. Supplies and storage have limited value if they cannot reach correct units when needed. A dispersed system may be harder to destroy in one strike, yet it can become more vulnerable to delays, misallocation, and coordination failures. Russia is trading speed and efficiency for resilience. That choice can reduce damage from a single attack, but it does not remove the network connecting storage areas, transport routes, repair points, and forward units. Dispersion can make each target harder to find without removing the system behind it. That is why the next stage of the contest moves beyond individual vehicles and toward the facilities that allow scattered supply chains to keep operating. Ukraine's 2026 drone campaign is aimed at the system behind Russian transport, not only at vehicles moving along it. Medium-range drones have been used against supply routes, fuel depots, vehicle parks, repair facilities, air defense positions, and command sites behind the front. The purpose is to pressure several points in the logistics chain, so damage in one area can make other parts of the network slower or less reliable. This matters most along the southern corridor linking occupied territory with Crimea. Routes running through Berdyansk, Melitopol, and Jankoy connect Russian-controlled areas with military hubs farther south. Fuel, ammunition, equipment, spare parts, and personnel depend on these roads and junctions. If traffic is forced to slow, reroute, or wait for damaged infrastructure to be repaired, the effect can spread beyond the original strike. The target structure can be understood as a sequence. Roads move vehicles. Vehicles carry supplies. Storage sites hold reserves. Repair facilities return damaged trucks to service. Air defense systems protect the route. Command posts coordinate movement, while energy infrastructure keeps support functions operating. None of these elements works alone. Pressure on one layer can increase the burden on the others, especially when the network is operating under constant surveillance. A strike on one tanker may delay a single delivery. A strike on a depot can affect many future deliveries. Damage to a repair facility can keep trucks out of service for longer, while pressure on a major junction can force traffic onto slower routes. This is why Ukraine's campaign cannot be measured only by the number of vehicles hit. The larger question is whether the network is losing speed, flexibility, and reserve capacity. Reuters has reported that the campaign has disrupted Russian logistics and contributed to fuel shortages in Crimea. Russian-appointed authorities on the peninsula have acknowledged pressure on fuel and energy supplies. However, these problems should not be attributed to one cause alone. Fuel availability can be affected by strikes on transport, storage, power infrastructure, port activity, repair work, and the ability to move replacement supplies through alternative routes. The broader Ukrainian objective appears to be increasing the cost of every delivery before it reaches combat units. A shipment that must travel farther, wait longer, use a less direct route, or require extra protection becomes more expensive in time and resources. Even if the cargo eventually arrives, the system may have to work harder to deliver the same amount. That pressure matters because military logistics depends on flow, timing, and coordination rather than the presence of supplies somewhere in the rear. At the operational level, delays can accumulate. A late fuel shipment can restrict vehicle movement. Missing ammunition can reduce fire support. Spare parts arriving behind schedule can keep damaged equipment inactive longer than planned. None of these problems has to be decisive by itself. When several occur together across the corridor, they can reduce tempo and force commanders to spend more time solving supply problems instead of supporting frontline operations. This can also complicate planning for units preparing future operations. Ukraine is therefore trying to make distance behind the front less of a safe zone and more of a contested logistics space. The campaign is not simply about destroying trucks. It is about making the support system less predictable, more expensive, and harder to sustain. Yet the deeper these drones operate, the more they enter a battle space protected by systems designed to break the kill chain itself. Russia is not only hiding vehicles and depots, it is also trying to blind, disrupt, and destroy the platforms hunting them. Russia is trying to protect its logistics network not only by hiding cargo, but also by attacking the systems that allow Ukrainian drones to find and strike it. Electronic warfare has become one of the main tools in that effort, especially as Ukraine relies on long-range communications to guide some drones deep behind the front. Ukrainian officials say Russian forces have deployed jamming equipment near important supply areas. Among the systems identified by Ukraine is Volna Kupol Garant, which is designed to interfere with satellite-based communications, including some Starlink connections used during Ukrainian drone missions. If the operator loses the link, the drone may struggle to receive commands, transmit video, or adjust its course during an attack. This creates a contest over the electromagnetic spectrum. Ukraine needs reliable communications to maintain surveillance and guide strikes, while Russia is trying to make those links unstable or unusable. Yet every jammer that begins operating can also create a new problem for Moscow. A system powerful enough to disrupt communications can become an important target itself if Ukrainian reconnaissance identifies its location. That creates a repeating cycle. Russia deploys electronic warfare to protect transport routes. Ukraine searches for the jammer. If the system is found and struck, drone operations may become easier again in that area. Russia must then replace, relocate, or reinforce the equipment. The result is an ongoing contest between detection, disruption, and counterattack rather than a simple battle between one drone and one truck. Air defense adds another layer. During a Reuters visit to Ukraine's 422nd Unmanned Systems Regiment, the unit launched a Ram-2X drone at a Russian fuel tanker. The attack missed. A surveillance drone that continued tracking the vehicle was then hit by a Russian Tor surface-to-air missile system. The incident showed that Ukrainian missions can fail, and that Russian short-range defenses remain capable of protecting important areas. It also demonstrated how one defensive action can immediately reshape the next step in the engagement. The Tor engagement revealed another feature of this contest. When an air defense system fires, it may protect the immediate target, but it can also expose its own presence. Ukrainian personnel recorded the Tor position in a digital battlefield targeting system, creating the possibility that the launcher could become a target for a later mission. This does not mean every Russian defensive action automatically benefits Ukraine. Tor systems can destroy drones, jammers can break communications, and layered protection can force Ukrainian crews to change routes or abandon missions. These defenses can reduce the effectiveness of repeated attacks and increase the resources needed to reach the same target. Still, protecting logistics now requires more than moving trucks. Every additional protective layer also requires crews, power, maintenance, communications, and coordination, increasing the burden on forces assigned to defend rear areas. Russia must also defend the electronic and airspace environment around those routes. Radar, jammers, and short-range missile systems all become part of the protection network, and each one can become part of Ukraine's target list. The contest therefore extends beyond whether one drone can survive one jammer or one Tor launcher. As road movements require more layers of protection, alternative supply routes become more valuable, and the Sea of Azov enters the next stage of the same logistic struggle. Russia is not relying only on roads to keep Crimea supplied. Maritime routes across the Sea of Azov provide another channel for moving fuel and other cargo, giving Moscow more flexibility when land transport comes under pressure. This redundancy matters because a military supply network becomes more resilient when it can shift volume between roads, rail lines, ports, and shipping lanes instead of depending on one corridor. On July 7th, the Ukrainian military said drones struck a group of tankers in the Sea of Azov that Kyiv accused of helping deliver fuel to Crimea. Ukraine said 12 tankers were attacked over 2 days. 8 of those vessels were described as being under sanctions, and each was reported to have a deadweight capacity of about 7,000 metric tons. These figures come from Ukrainian statements and should be treated with appropriate caution. The significance of maritime transport lies in scale. A single tanker can move far more fuel than a road vehicle, which means sea routes can replace part of the capacity lost or delayed on land. That capacity also creates vulnerability. If a tanker is damaged, delayed, or forced to change its schedule, the effect can be larger than the loss of one truck. Ports, loading points, anchorages, support vessels, and shipping routes all become part of the same logistics chain. A disruption at any of these points can slow movement even when the tanker itself remains operational. This does not mean Russia is abandoning road transport for the sea. The more realistic picture is a parallel system. Land routes handle continuous movement towards southern forces, while maritime transport adds volume and provides an alternative when roads become more dangerous. That combination gives Russia more options, but it also spreads the burden of protection across a wider area. For Ukraine, the objective does not have to be a complete blockade of the Sea of Azov. Even limited pressure can matter if it forces vessels to wait longer, alter routes, increase escort requirements, or use less efficient loading points. Each adjustment adds time and cost to the supply process. The struggle is therefore becoming wider than a contest over individual convoys. That distinction matters because disruption can accumulate even when supply lines remain open. Russia is trying to preserve multiple ways of moving fuel toward Crimea, while Ukraine is testing how many of those routes can be placed under pressure at the same time. Sea transport gives Moscow valuable redundancy, but redundancy is not free. Every additional route needs ports, crews, fuel handling equipment, scheduling, security, and coordination. If Ukraine can force repeated delays across both land and maritime networks, Russia may need more resources simply to maintain the same level of supply. The Sea of Azov campaign therefore shows how logistics pressure can expand across domains without requiring total control of either one. The next question is how much damage that wider campaign is actually causing. That requires returning to the land corridor and examining the scale of Ukrainian claims there. Ukraine's unmanned systems forces said its units hit more than 360 Russian fuel tankers and heavy transport vehicles in 1 week along the land corridor leading toward Crimea. The figure is striking, but it needs careful attribution. It is an official Ukrainian claim, and it has not been independently verified. The word hit is also important because a vehicle can be damaged, disabled, or temporarily taken out of service without being completely destroyed. That distinction changes how the number should be understood. Counting vehicles alone does not show the full effect on Russian logistics. The more useful questions are, how many trucks were removed from service, how quickly replacements arrived, how much cargo was delayed, and whether traffic volumes changed afterward. A large number of strikes can create pressure, but their military value depends on what happens to the supply flow. Ukraine's broader objective is to weaken Russian logistics before fuel, ammunition, weapons, and equipment reach units operating in southern Ukraine. The impact can be measured at 3 levels. At the tactical level, a successful strike removes or damages a vehicle and its cargo. At the operational level, repeated losses can slow routes, reduce convoy size, or force commanders to change transport schedules. At the strategic level, sustained disruption can make the supply network supporting Crimea and southern forces more expensive, less predictable, and harder to maintain. This is why logistics throughput matters more than dramatic images of burning trucks. If Russia can replace vehicles quickly and continue moving the same amount of fuel and ammunition, the campaign may raise costs without seriously reducing combat power. If replacement rates fall behind losses, delivery times increase, and alternative routes become less effective, the pressure becomes more significant. Other indicators also matter. Analysts should watch convoy size, transport time, fuel availability, vehicle replacement rates, and the number of air defense or electronic warfare assets Russia must assign to rear area protection. These measures reveal whether interdiction is changing the performance of the network rather than simply producing visible damage. That measurement determines whether the campaign is creating disruption or only forcing Moscow to adapt. The final question is therefore not how many more tankers Ukraine can add to its target list. It is whether Russia can still deliver the same volume of fuel, ammunition, and equipment to the front at the same speed, with the same reliability, and at a similar cost. The disguised water and milk tankers point to a much larger change in the war. Russia is no longer trying only to protect weapons and troops. It is also trying to hide the movement of the fuel that keeps its forces operating. Moscow has responded with smaller convoys, civilian-looking vehicles, dispersed storage, secondary roads, electronic warfare, air defense, and maritime supply routes. Ukraine has answered by widening its target set from individual trucks to depots, repair sites, command nodes, defensive systems, and shipping. This has created a constant cycle of adaptation. Every Russian measure that improves survival can also increase cost, delay, or complexity. Every Ukrainian strike may force Moscow to spend more resources protecting the next delivery. The decisive measure, therefore, is not the number of tankers hit in 1 week. It is whether Russia must use more vehicles, more time, and more protection to deliver the same amount of fuel and ammunition. If logistics throughput continues to fall, the consequences will eventually appear at the front through fewer vehicles in operation, slower movement, reduced fire support, and greater difficulty sustaining combat operations across southern Ukraine. Understanding war is not about celebrating destruction. It is about learning how military power, logistics, technology, and political decisions can shape the path toward either a longer conflict or a possible peace. Subscribe to Military Force for more clear and balanced analysis of the forces changing today's battlefield.